Hey guys, I am back with another video. If the scenery looks the same, it's because I'm filming several videos back to back. Because throughout the week, I stay very busy. Of course, spending time with my boyfriend takes up a lot of time. um, and of course, just work takes up a lot of time. Having a full time job. So I don't always get to do things throughout the week like I would like to. So I'm filming several videos now. So if it all looks the same, that's why. Um, so I wanted to talk about today, um, my relationship with elves and elvish spirits or elven spirits. Um, the elves. Who are the elves? What are elves? Well, I'll tell you what I don't think elves are, and that is this really offensive and annoying image of elves that I'd really dislike, which is like the Victorian era image of elves. These really small, wee people. I hate that. I know that there's history to that, obviously, and that some people believe that and to be a truth for them, and that's how they experience elves, and that's how they work with elves and fairies. But I do not like it. I see it as belittling them. Haha, um, I just don't like it. I like seeing them as equal and or greater to myself. And when they're that little, I just can't connect to them that way in that guise. So, I don't really like the Santa's Little Helper crap and all that. I don't like that. I like the original version of elves, which comes from Anglo-Saxon and Nordic traditions, from like the gods, the Vanir and the Asir, etc., etc. So like Germany, Russia, Norway, Sweden, Eastern Europe, basically, and the very northern Europe. These are places that worked with elves and developed elves and their mythology, whereas Western Europe worked with fairies and the Fae. Elves and fairies are very similar, and some argue that they're exactly the same beings, they just have different cultural faces. But for the sake of this video, and my personal belief system is that they aren't the same, we're going to talk specifically just about elves as their own entities. So, pretty much all of us are familiar with J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, and stuff like that. Um, and that interpretation of elves, which is they're like really gorgeous. They have like the pointed ears, very like anglical features, very symmetrical features, light hair, very Aryan, gorgeous people that are human sized, pretty much. And I pretty much accept that to be true. He drew a lot of his work from real mythology, so those elves certainly existed to those people, to these ancient Vikings and the Norse, the Goths, and all this. So I do believe that. But of course, living in a global culture as we do now, and having this new global consciousness that we share and feed our magic and energy into to pull from, I think the elves have changed, as do gods. I think that as we've evolved and become a global society, our gods have reflected that. And some people argue that's because they're not real and because it's all thought forms. And to that I say, I don't care. Even if they aren't real and it's all fake, I don't care. It's still helping me on my path in life, so I don't give a shit. But anywho, um, elves. So I do believe that they're usually human sized. That's how I perceive them. I do normally perceive them sometimes as even being larger. They're infinitely more beautiful than us. I don't perceive imperfections in their skin, in their bodies, or anything like that. They're always perfect, which is kind of paradoxical. But anywho, referring back to another video I made. But um, yes, the elves. I've worked with them since around 2009. After growing up as a child, always loving them and merfolk. Obsessed with mermaids as a child, which I'll also make a video about. But elves have been really, really powerful for me in terms of finding my inner strength, my inner confidence, loving my physical form, um, just gaining confidence. Working with elves has helped me gain confidence and strength and self-love. So, referring to a journal again, like I did in a previous video, I started working with them in 2009. And when I work with elves, I speak in tongues a lot. Now, if you're not familiar with tongues, speaking in tongues, that's basically speaking in an incoherent language. There are a lot of studies about speaking in tongues. It's very popular in the Protestant Christian churches, like the Pentecostal, and things like that, especially here in the South, in the American South. Speaking in tongues is a huge part of just church life. To speak in tongues, they believe, is to kind of have it's almost like a channeling. You kind of let an angel or a saint or or God, some kind of higher being, speak through you. And since we can't completely comprehend everything of the other world, the spiritual realm, sometimes it comes out as gibberish. But you basically understand the feelings and emotions behind the gibberish. I love it. And I partake in it a lot, usually only when I'm working with elves, though. And I think that's because, again, they are higher forms than us. They operate on a different frequency, on another level, on another plane, and they know more than us. And we can't comprehend their full energies, their full selves. We see them as humanized looking. We perceive them as human sounding, and as human acting. But there's other stuff that just gets lost kind of in translation, and that's the tongues, that's the gibberish, that's the information that we can't comprehend, but that we feel and experience. I think that's why when you speak to someone from another country that doesn't speak the same language as you, you still get across that feeling of what they're saying, that emotion at least. You might not know what the hell they're saying, but you can tell that they're feeling happy or sad or angry. These are things that are just universal, and I think that goes with spirit work. So, the elves have kind of taught me and helped me create kind of a system of magic that is all their own, or our own, like me and the elves. And I thought I would share it with you. I've never shared it with anyone, not even my closest friends. This has always been extremely secretive information for me. And I actually, in my journal, had wrote in front of it, like, please don't read this. Anyone who opens to this, please be respectful and just skip this. But now, this was many years ago, obviously. So now I figure, what the hell, why not share it? And these are just things that I've learned. And techniques that I've learned from the elves to use in magic and things like that. And there are bajillions of different types of elves before I get started on that. You know how there are the Fae. And within the Fae, there are fairies, pixies, sylphs, gnomes, brownies, hobgoblins, goblins, etc., etc., etc. There are tons of different types of Fae, and usually the elves are lumped in there as well. Well, again, taking the elves out of that equation for this video and leaving the Fae over here, within elves, there's so many different types of elves. They're like elemental elves, like fire elves, water elves, air elves. These are all my perceived notions of how I've experienced elves, by the way. I'm not speaking anyone's universal truth, just my own. But there are like fire elves, water elves, stone elves, lightning elves, blah, 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 blah. And then there are cyber elves. You guys know that I'm a huge urban magician, an urban chaotic magician, an urban chaot. And so I work with the computer a lot and with microwaves and cell phones and that kind of energy in my magic. And I believe in an astral realm that is solely cyber, like a cyber realm that you can go into in your consciousness. So in going there, in spirit journeying, I've encountered that elven spirits and gods existed in the cyber realm as well. And so I've experienced these kind of like techno elves, as I like to call them. And they're like, if you've ever seen the movie Tron or the sequel Tron Legacy, they look very much like that. Again, how pop culture influences my path. But they look very techno, and they have like visors with like numbers and letters going across them, and they just seem so magical and so mysterious. The mystery. And that's how I've come to know them. But then there are like these deep sea elves that I like to call them, and they're not merfolk. They're very different from the mer. because I've experienced the mer myself and have come to know how I perceive the mer and how I've come to know them is very different from how I perceive these oceanic elves or deep sea elves. There are a couple of references in fiction, but also in nonfiction, about elves living in the ocean. And they're not called merfolk. They're not mermaids or mermen or marrows or anything like that. They're sirens. They're something else that live in the ocean. And so I consider them to be deep sea elves. When I say deep sea, I mean not just the ocean with the pretty light and the sharks and all the oceanic life, whales, and where the merfolk would swim. Something deeper, something chthonic, you know? We're almost fearish, like in the darkness of the ocean, where no light penetrates, where you have like the glowfish and things like that, the anglerfish that look scary, the trenches that we can't go into that we think that dinosaur kind of monsters still live in, the megalodon, which is a shark that's like infinitely larger than a great white, which is terrifying. Some people believe that it still lives down there. You know, these are places in the ocean that even our technology can't go to because the pressure's too deep. So we haven't explored yet. So there's a ton of mystery there. And that's where I believe the essence, the energy of this particular type of elf that I've worked with before, the deep sea elf, resides. I call them the Olivicanaren, sometimes the Olivicanata. And because that's kind of the name they gave to me for themselves. And that's where they reside, is in the abyss, in the darkness of the ocean, with these crazy creatures. And my heart's beating very fast because I feel such a connection to this topic, to elves, and I've never talked about this before, and as I speak, I kind of feel like that elfin energy, like my elfin spirit guides kind of being like, what? Can't believe you're saying this to people. But anywho, these are some terms that I've come up with for concepts that the elves have showed me. So one being elf time. Very early on, when I was trying to really get into like meditation, I found that Zen meditation was not working for me. Like I couldn't just sit still and be quiet and let thoughts come and go and do that whole like Buddhist meditation. It wasn't working. And so they proposed another version to me, and I called it elf time. And basically I've come to know it that the elves do not sleep. I mean, they're spirits, why would they sleep? But they don't really sleep, but they do enter this state of altered consciousness for a prolonged period of time that I call elf time. And it's kind of, they go into like a meditated state, and they stay there. And they're not really asleep, but they're not really awake either. They're somewhere in between asleep and awake. You know that state that you get into sometimes? And they stay there in that state in between asleep and awake. And from there, they receive all this information from the universe. They're in between states of consciousness. They're in between like alpha and beta waves. They're somewhere in between. And they're receiving all this information from the mystery, from God, from ether, from whatever you want to call it. By being in between states of consciousness, almost like being between life and death, they're open to so much more energy and magic and power. They're in between the veil, not on either side of it. And so they've kind of taught me a technique to stay in between that realm like that and to gather all this information and to find out truths and to learn more about other people. And in that state, you become so much more intuitive. It's like answers just flood into your head, almost like telepathy. And it's fascinating. Also kind of dangerous because sometimes I feel like I kind of lose myself in that place. But it's awesome. And I call it the elf time. Also, there are times when I go to a place and it feels really like a physical place here on Earth, and it feels very negative. Like maybe you walked into a room where someone just had a heated argument. Or maybe you walked into a room where someone just had sex, and that energy or that emotion, that feeling is just a little smothering to you. You're like, okay, this isn't bad energy. It's just really strong. Or a person maybe is around, and you're like, you're a lot to handle, in a good way or a bad way. That's when I use this technique they've showed me called the elf light, which is this visualization of this light energy. It's usually several different colors at once. It's almost imperceivable, and I imagine it just spreading out of my hands, and I touch the person or thing that feels bad to me. So like a part of the room if I don't like it. And then I imagine that like kaleidoscopic light just like whoosh. It's really quick. It's just a flash. I don't imagine it spreading out. It's just like poof. Instantly everything's been cleansed, like flash cleansed, you know? And I'll do it to a person subtly sometimes. I'll just be like, okay, whew, you know, or to myself. I'm like, okay, It's just like this very quick, like flash cleanse. Like, boosh. You've heard of like flash freezing things or flash burning them? It's like that. It's just like, boom, cleansed. Like a smite. um, and then also the elf light it's got two meanings to me. It's got that cleansing technique, but also consider the elf light to kind of be the name of that in-between state that I was talking about before when you're in elf time. Elf light is kind of that state that I think of that's in between all things. Oh, and then I thought I would kind of read something that might not make sense, but it's a recounting of a vision that I had while in the elf time. And I just really like it. It was a very powerful vision for me to experience. At the time, this was back in like 2012, 2011, I think actually. No, 2012. And it still sticks with me. It was a very powerful experience where I was meeting this entity called the Elf One, which to me is more than just their god. So it's not like Freyr, the god of the elves in Norse mythology. It's something bigger than even Freyr. The Elf One to me is this collection of elven energy. It's all of them conglomerated into one form. It's every god associated with elves in one form. It's every animal, every spirit, every mineral, every energy that is elfish presented to me in one vessel. So it's incredibly powerful, omniscient, omnipotent energy that is elfish. So, it's too much to explain, you guys. The Elf One. So, it's just the supreme sovereign elf energy or consciousness in one form. And it came to me in this vision for the very first time many years ago, and I recorded it. I'll read it to you now. Quiet now. Silence amongst the living here in this green sanctuary. So I had, in the elf time, I pictured in my head, suddenly, while I was in the elf time, experiencing the elf light, I suddenly envisioned myself, like it came to me, this vision came to me, I didn't create it, that suddenly I was in a forest. A very, very different forest from anything here on Earth, and I could suddenly see it with my physical eyes and was like aware of it, and I could hear and smell and taste it. All of my senses were activated in this vision. That's what made it so powerful for me. And I wrote this down very abstractly because, again, I wrote this after coming out of that consciousness, and you're kind of in this weird place. So I hope most of it makes sense. Anywho, quiet now. Silence amongst the living here in this green sanctuary. I'm sitting with my eyes closed. Even my third eye seems to be slowly relaxing into a half-closed position. I'm silent against the velvety moss when I hear him. And I did perceive it as a him, but not lately, but after that, I did also perceive the elf one as female. And now in my practice, whenever I encounter the elf one, it's genderless. And sometimes it has aspects of both genders on it. Like I'll see genitalia from both genders on its body. So I'm silent against the velvety moss when I hear him. I am gone at this point, lost in the elf light. I do not register that I am either alive or dead, which is a crazy feeling, you guys. Breathing can be heard, but I do not think it is coming from my own lungs, since I can no longer feel my body. The breathing exhalations seem to be coming from the moss, the oaks, towering above me, and even the very sunlight penetrating my flesh. It is as if I am a part of the wind, the minerals. I am the breath, but I am not breathing. He eyes me through a pair of aspen trees across from the mossy she. You know, she is just a Celtic term for spirits and things now, but originally a she just meant like a hill. So from across the mossy she. His locks are long, longer than my own, flowing to his hips, laid delicately across a soft material that I cannot identify. And this is where kind of the tongues come in. I suddenly heard this word coming from his mouth, and it sounded like this. Sola varalakra miton. The world seems to respond to his melodic voice. The trees bend, the animals purr and knead at the ground. His voice, by the heavens, his voice. I am spellbound. So that was my experience with the elf one. This kind of elf energy, God, more than that, this elf consciousness. And the elves have done so much more than just teach me techniques of magic and things like that. If you've ever heard of otherkin, the concept of otherkin, elfkin has been a term that I very much have accepted on myself. But yeah, the elves have taught me confidence, because they know no darkness really in the sense that we do. No like misconceptions and like doubts. They don't know doubt. That's a good word. They don't doubt at all. But yeah, the elves, I feel very kin to the elves, a very deep kinship with the elves. And I love working with elven spirits and elven energies. They always have more to teach me, more mystery to unfurl to me. But I thought I would share it because I think it's fairly unique. And I would like to hear if any of you work with specific types of spirits. You know, a lot of us work with gods. But I think that working with spirits, like instead of working with deities, working with entities is a completely different kind of relationship. And it's completely different in my view. And they teach you things that the gods don't teach you. They focus on things that the gods don't focus on. They're very much different forces, and I need them both. Yeah, it's just hard for me to talk about elves and to explain them because so much of it is unspeakable. You know what I mean? It's like all these things that I've come to know internally, all these answers that I've gotten internally, but for some reason it's hard for me to give voice to them and to speak them out because it's like just things that you come to know to be true. I don't know if I can explain it. I'm trying. I'm really trying right now. Sometimes I think internal answers and truths can't be manifested outside. And I guess that's what the elves do for me is is this making sense? They give me answers and I come to know things, like things shift in me. I have energetic shifts and they just become this new truth, this new form of self for me. And for some reason, it just can't be put into words, the experiences that I have with elves. Jeez. But I thought I would make just a little sampling of what I do with like working with entities, specifically elves, and I would like to hear from you. So, namaste nashe, live and be well, you guys. Peace out.